Thank you very much, Professor Ren, for that introduction. Just over 30 years ago, I attended my very first Public Communication of Science and Technology Network conference in Canada, Montreal, organised by Bernard Schiele. And that began a 30-year journey with PCST, which has changed my life fundamentally, both professionally and personally. And today we want to explore how PCST has evolved and how its culture has changed over its 35-year history. It started in 1989 in Poitiers, France. I'm not going to introduce our speakers. Most of them you will know. You can read more about us online. You heard what country they were from. What I'm going to ask each of them to do is tell us first how they first heard about PCST. And I'm going to start with Bernard Schiele, who went to the very first PCST conference in Poitiers, France. So Bernard, how did you first hear about PCST?
The answer is very simple. It simply did not exist at the time.
You were a co-founder?
Yeah, I was a co-founder.
Okay, I should follow on from that because in 1993, I was a visiting scholar in the US studying risk communication, and I was at Cornell University with Professor Bruce Lewinstein, and he told me about PCST and about this conference that was happening in Montreal, and he said we should go along and present about Australian science communication. So that's how I learnt about PCST, and I had a phone conversation with Bernard through a speakerphone. There were no such things as internet or Zoom at the time, and he was very excited about us joining him in Montreal. So Toss, how did you learn about PCST?
I was sitting quietly at my desk one day, and it may have been a phone call, but I had instructions and they came from Ireland. And it was Jenny on the phone, and she said, "We are giving a paper at Bernard's Montreal conference in 1994, and you are going to write it because I am too busy." And so I then spent maybe 3 months writing this paper, and this was before the days of internet. So I had to collect a lot of information, and I collected it by fax machine. Some of the young people down the back will not remember fax machines. I will explain later.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm moving on to Donghong Cheng. Now, Donghong, you were a member of the scientific committee for many years. When did you first hear about PCST?
I was honored to be invited to participate in PCST 2001 in Geneva, hosted by the communication unit of CERN. And also at that meeting, I was accepted by the scientific committee as a member. I still remember one afternoon after the meeting, someone from the committee, I'm sorry, I couldn't remember who, if I remember, I will give a gift to him or her, came to me and say, "Donghong, we are going to have a scientific committee in this evening. Do you want to be a member of this scientific committee?" I think maybe my performance of the last 2 days is still good. So, and I like this kind of, session, speakers and atmosphere. Why not? So I said, okay, that if I could be the member of the scientific committee, that's my pleasure and my honor. And then in the very late evening, the same people came to me and said, "Congratulations, Donghong, you are now the member of our scientific committee of PCST." I would like to say, after more than 20 years have passed, I enjoy the atmosphere of working with colleagues to make something contribute to PCST. Chair, I hope I could have opportunity to present to the young generation of the science communication professionals, that what kind of contribute I work with my colleagues to make to this great organization. And what I have learned, I have gained, China have gained from this organization. Thank you.
We'll come back to you about that, Donghong. Sook-kyoung, I wanted to move to you. And you had a conference in Korea in 2006, but before then, when did you first learn about PCST?
Right, actually, when I finished my PhD in 2001, it was about science popularization, and I was looking for my job. And I finally get a job at Korea Science Foundation, and there I met Gascoigne, and he kindly introduced about the PCST network. So in 2002, I went to Cape Town, South Africa, the 7th International Conference. There I met Marina, I met Massimiliano Bucchi, and I met all of my old friends. It was a wonderful time. And since then, my life changed greatly. So after that, I involved in science communication until now. Right, that's my first acquaintance of the PCST.
So to our youngest and newest member, and the current chair of the program committee for Aberdeen 2025, Heather Doran, when did you first learn about PCST and get drawn into our wonderful scientific committee and community?
So I really wanted to say that I learned about it through the internet, but that wouldn't quite be true. So it was kind of through the internet, but also through a colleague of mine who was aware of PCST and had attended the conference in Brazil. He had gone there. He was my boss working at the University of Aberdeen, Ken Skeldon. He came back and we said, maybe we should think about bidding to host the conference. And so in 2016, we did that in Istanbul. So that was my first PCST conference, although I was aware of quite a lot of the activities of PCST already. We bid to host the conference in 2016. We were successful. And since then, it's been quite a whirlwind of unexpected twists and turns in some ways, as we were due to host the conference in 2020. And it will now take place in 2025. But it's been incredible to be part of this group, meet an amazing group of people. I was elected to the scientific committee in 2018 at the conference in New Zealand, and I've been heavily involved really since 2016 in everything that PCST is doing, which has been amazing, absolutely incredible.
I should say that Heather was pregnant with her first child when she bid in 2016, and that child's now 8 years old.
He is now 8 years old. I feel like I should bring him along to say hello to everybody.
I wanted to go back to you, Bernard, and ask what drove the formation of PCST in 1989? It started off being very much French and Spanish, didn't it, in its origins?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So to make a very, very long story short, there are a few elements to be considered when we think about the foundation of the PCST network. In around 1980, people all over the world became aware of the fact that science and technology were the driving force that were reshaping culture, society, and economy. And the OECD took the lead in producing different reports suggesting government to add to their toolbox a Ministry of Science and Technology. Before that, there were none. So the government thought a little bit and decided, at least in Western country, to add to their toolbox a Ministry of Science and Technology. But they told themselves that's not enough. We need something more. Promoting science, promoting technology is one thing, but if we want to sustain the development of our country, and if we want to be competitive in the world, we have to develop a culture of science. We have to make sure that everyone in our country is aware of the importance of science and technology. And it is in that context that the French ministry, because the first conference was held in France, created one post in science communication at the University of Poitiers. And Pierre Fayard, who was the first person who held the first, what will become the PCST network, was hired as a very young professor. And he had two mandates. The first mandate was to develop research in science communication, and two, to train science communicators. And above all, he was expected to organize an international conference to bring together, to bring in France, some scholars who were already studying science communication or teaching science communication. It was extremely new. It didn't exist at the time. It was at the very first. So this is how it began. And in 1989, he got in touch with different people who he knew at the time were already working on that topic and invited them to come to Poitiers. And this is how it began.
Wow. That same year, 1989, was when I joined the Commonwealth Scientific Industrial Research Organisation in Australia after being a journalist and started my science communication career. So it seems that maybe science communication is starting to be thought about across the world. But I wanted to go 14 years down the track to 2004, and Donghong. There was a change that happened in PCST, and we decided to hold our very first symposium, which was to be in China the following year. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and that change?
Thank you. I tell you the first how I joined the PCST. That's in 2001, and at that moment, China is starting to launching or in a draft period of a national scheme for scientific literacy. And I was the chair of the committee to drafting that and collecting about 20 professional teams to do the research on some basic issues that we should make it clear, then we can make actions. At that moment, I joined the PCST. I think that PCST is a very, is a rich pool for us to know, to do the research. And also I think that Chinese scholars' participation will contribute to the diversity and the variety of the achievement to the PCST. And then we think that only every 2 years conference maybe is not enough, because for that conference, the professionals in the research or in the practical field all gather together to make the brainstorming, help each other. But we want to point on some special issues to have in-depth discussion. The PCST conference couldn't, at that moment, provide this kind of platform. So in PCST 2004, at that moment, I was already the committee member of the scientific committee. I discussed with Bernard and Jenny. He said, is it okay? How about we create a new style of dialogue for PCST or among PCST, in-depth focus on issues or focus on special region of the science communicators. And then 3 of us, we make a few kind of discussions during the days, and at the last day of the scientific committee, 3 of us wrote a proposal, said, set up a kind of communication platform called PCST Symposium. And some committee member argued that how to make it different with the PCST conference. And then 3 of us, we think it will be different in 2 ways. Because the symposium either focus on the social context of special region. For instance, PCST in Asia or PCST in in Africa or North America, something like that. So the scholars in the same or similar cultural background or facing the similar social context will have more, how to say, in-depth discussion.
So it was a geographical thing.
Yeah.
On a specific topic.
Yeah. But the second aspect I most appreciate is focus on issue. Because PCS conference, you see so many sessions, so many subtitles. We want to gathering that the people in the field to communicate, to meet each other. But the symposium focus on 1 or 2 issues, have a kind of brainstorming and debate. So the committee seems be persuaded and prove the suggestion of 3 of us to have a PCST symposium in Beijing in next year. So that's the 2004. And then it's suffering, it's kind of turn to me. What kind of topic for the first symposium? Luckily, at the spring of 2006, Sook-kyoung, I don't know if you remember, because you at the National Science Foundation, and you invite me to Seoul, because Koreans want to initiate a national scheme for raise Korean people's scientific literacy. And because we are all in the PCST, they know I did the job to drafting the Chinese one. So they invited me to Seoul to present on how and what kind of the national scheme for China. And you also invited Sir Roland Jackson. He, at that moment, was the CEO of the British Council. During the free time, 2 of us sat at the bench of the Han River. Okay. So I talked with Sir Roland. I said, I'm suffering with the issue, what kind of issue should present to the first scientific symposium. I wrote a few choices I'm thinking to them. And so Roland and Edmund, English people, really, the English thinking and much better than mine. And he said, how about the strategic issue of science communication? That belongs to Sir Roland Jackson. I said, wonderful. So the first scientific forum focused on the strategies.
Okay, Donghong, we'll come back and we'll talk about what came out of that. But just to take that on a bit further, that was the sort of move. We'd had previous conferences after Montreal in Australia, in Berlin in Germany, then in Geneva, in Cape Town, in Barcelona, but then we had the Seoul one, Sook-kyoung. So tell us what that meant for Asia to have that conference in Korea, and then we'll come back and we'll look at some of the other benefits.
Right. Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. In 2006, after the following PCST midterm event in Beijing, I mean, you had a lot of visibility already in Asia. So that was the focal point to attract many Asian practitioners and academicians in the field of science communication. And this one actually was the, two Beijing Symposium and Seoul Conference is the really turning point for Asian people to realize and to institutionalize of science communication in university. But after 20 years, 3 countries, China, Korea, Japan, have a different pathway because it is a difference of the culture. Although we are in the same Asian countries, but we have differences according to the culture, according to the people's mind, according to the political situation. So that is very interesting. I think we should discuss this thing later about after this conference.
Okay, before we go on and look at some of the benefits, Bernard, from being the founder and seeing the other countries come in, how did the culture of PCST change? And from that, I'll go and ask Tosca about what happened when we started to democratise PCST.
So how did it change? It changed. It's very simple. At the very start, there was, I say, mostly 30 people present at the first conference. Maybe 6, 8, maybe 10 out of that 30 people continued to be in touch. But as we moved, and when the first conference was held, we couldn't expect what would be the future of the conference. We didn't even know that we would have another conference. And this is why the second conference took place in Madrid. And then it began to take shape. And it's in Madrid that Pierre Fayard asked me, what about organizing a conference in Montreal? I said, my God, that's yes, okay, I'll try. And it took me 2.5 years to organize the conference. So it began very, very slowly. But the going on and developing conference and bringing in new people brought new ideas and new questions and new problems. And this is how the whole movement progressively took shape. So it's the people who came, attended the conference, engaged in conversation with other colleagues, that brought in new questions, new perspectives, new venues, new vision, and then progressively it expanded. So it developed, I would say, naturally. There were no, I would say, predetermined some sort of directive, of perspective, or vision. It built up from, it was a grassroots movement, so to speak.
Okay, we get to, I think it was around about Sweden. Was it TOS in 2008 when the committee started to talk about becoming more democratic? Tell us about how the scientific committee and the organisation started to change.
Before I do that, I'd like to add a bit to Bernard's answer there, because in some ways the PCST movement has just about defined the subject of science communication. And if you think at the time of 1989, there were no journals of science communication anywhere in the world. There was no international organisation to hold meetings. There was no association for people interested in science communication, and those things only started after the PCST movement started, and gradually they grew. And the other things, I think, which are really important in this is that there was no internet and there was no social media. And so the way that we had to communicate about science communication was through was through established media channels like newspapers and television stations and radio stations. And one of the big differences that made is that it went through a small number of people who moderated the field, and they were the editors of newspapers, the journalists, the people who produced television shows. And now, of course, everyone is their own moderator. However, I move on to our conference in India. And I remember looking round the room at the meeting of the scientific committee, and there we all were, sitting there, about 16 or 17 of us. And I said, and what we used to do to elect new members of the scientific committee, that people would be nominated by existing members, which was a very cosy and nice way of doing it, and that's how Donghong became a member. It was almost like she was talent spotted. And so we saw a new promising person who should be involved, and so we said, Donghong, would you like to become a member of the committee? And that system worked pretty well for the first 20 years. But we got to India, the conference in India, and I remember looking round the room at the existing members of the committee, and I said to I was president at the time, I said to the group that we have no nominations for new members of the committee. And so the committee has become 100 years older, and we are going to die out. We are going to be the first and only generation of scientific committee members. And we realised then that we had to move to a new system to get new blood into the system. We had to open it up to new countries and to new people, and that began the democratisation movement.
Okay, thanks, Toss. I wanted to move then to you, Heather. You're the newest in the internet age. What struck you about PCST, and how's it changed in the 10 years that you've been associated with the organisation?
So I think one of the biggest changes in this has obviously been how we were then interacting from 2020 onwards. So although there were some online meetings before then, things really expanded during that time, and that has created a lot of opportunities for different ways in which people can get involved with PCST. The series of webinars that PCST have led have meant that people who haven't been able to travel can interact with PCST. It's meant that we can meet more frequently throughout the year, so there's more issues that can be discussed, more planning that can be done during that time. That said, I don't think there's any replacement as well for meeting face to face. The conferences are incredibly important, and I think the meeting in Rotterdam really showed that. It was the first chance everyone had to really get together again, and it was so important, and I think everyone was very moved at that meeting as well, at being able to do that. And so as PCST has also grown in its size, I think there's more and more role for the symposia as well, for the reasons you outlined and looking at specific issues. The conference is bigger, which is great, because then people get to meet more people and there's more involvement of other groups within PCST. The symposia can be used to discuss more maybe focused issues and support some work going on in regional areas as well. And then there's the virtual opportunities we have to meet. But also I think PCST is now well established. The expectations on PCST are very, very high. What people want to see PCST do is very broad. And PCST can only do that if people get involved, if they nominate, if they work with and join the scientific committee, I think is the important thing, to continue on that work. Because it's the members of PCST that make things happen, and so you have to put the time in to make that change. and to grow science communication in whichever area you're working in, because that's quite diverse as well.
Okay, I wanted to turn now to benefits, and in particular, maybe benefits to your culture, to yourself. And Donghong, you mentioned that it was a big thing for China. So tell us about the symposium and the benefits that came from that, but also from your ongoing interactions with PCST. I mean, did it have some cultural influences?
Thank you. Just I want to finish what I mentioned before. I bring two precious pictures of books. The first one at the human scale. That's the outcome of the first symposium. That symposium, we don't ask participants to present full paper, just abstract. And then we discuss, three of us work together to discuss which abstract could be accepted to contribute to the debate, to the outcomes. And then during the 2 days of the very vivid conference in Beijing, a lot of good ideas happened. And after the conference, we send the email at that moment to the people, invite them to finish, to extension.
We selected a number of papers, didn't we?
And then have this paper. I saw that Masmiano smiling on that because he and his team is one of the contributors. And this one, at the human scale, the title was given by Jenny. We discussed and then follow up. I
still remember when we edited that book.
This is a Springer book, Communicating Science in Social Content. I would like to mention that these two books is a kind of, achievement or obtainment we have from PCST. And I would like to mention that's the work of Bernard, Jenny, Michelle Kleisens, and I myself. Luckily, Toss. My last name, the first capital is C, so always put Donghong at the first. But actually, Bernard and Toss and Michelle did a lot. And another contribution, allow me to use this word, to PCST, is to set up the PCST archive. I follow the word that Bernard introduced, because the first about 10 PCST conference that no, officially, legally organization. So when I, for example, organized the conference, I set up a conference website, and after a few years, the website disappeared. So we think that we need to collect and maintain the resources of PCST. So in PCST, Florenza, Hans-Peter Peters and me, we raised a proposal to set up a PCST archive project with the support of Fu Jun, that's the moderator of it. He at the moment was the director of the CRISP, China Research Institute of Science Communication. And their team support this. So in Florenza, made a decision that PCST is going to collect our resources for PCST, for people involved. So with the help of the first dozens of organizers of the conferences, we finished this kind of very challenge work. So appreciate it.
That archive is very much now on the new PCST website, newish, and a lot of those resources are now available and a very important part of the website. So
appreciate that, because at that moment, organized the PCST in Montreal on no internet, not so easy to collect the digital version of the session, but you give the wording, paperwork, and Fujin make the people scanning it and make it happen. So I will quite finish. These are two contributions I work for PCST, and I would like to say what we gain. We gain much more than we pay, than we contribute. Because of the time, I just very short, limited to mention. The first one is the Bernard Schiele, was invited to chair the International Advisory Committee for the development of the new mission of the China Science and Technology Museum. That's a wonderful one. I really want to invite, if anyone went to Beijing to do any kind of professional or private study, visit the China Science and Technology Museum. That's close to the Olympic zone, but very special. Crowd of students, citizens visit, enjoy there. And Bernard, we always remember. The second one is the Martin Bauer. That because of the PCST Seoul, you hold a session to do the audit of the scientific literacy, civic scientific literacy. I wrote a very tough question to you, and then after that, so your team and Chris' team said good cooperation. You give good comments, recommendations to improve the China's audit survey on civic scientific literacy. Really, we remembered it. The last but not the least was cooperate with Sook-kyoung Cho, Masa Tauka. We, three of us, China, Korea, Japan, all in Asia. We have similarity, but we have different color. So because of the PCST, we all in the scientific committee. We found PCST, not the PCST, 3 country science communication roundtable every year. Oh, it's a good communication and good achievement. So we really benefit from PCST.
I think that's a really good point about that whole networking benefits. We're running short of time, so I'm just going to go around the room, ending with you, Bernard, for each of you to say what the benefits are, what particularly to you or to your country from being part of PCST are. So you, next, Heather.
For me, it's been the connection with this international network that has just been incredible, both personally and professionally, to grow and to learn. And I just want to mention a little bit about the conference in Aberdeen, and I think it's hard to know what you are going to come out from something before it's happened. But for me, one of the main things is thinking about the core values of PCST, bringing the research and practice together. That is a really important focus of mine. I often see that these can exist separately still, even though there's some awareness that each other exists, and the PCST conference is a great place, a reminder of that, and a real way that people can share those learnings, their projects, their information that they've done. So that's the main focus for me in Aberdeen, to bring those two kind of groups and communities together.
Sook-kyoung.
I mean, my challenging, right? Hello, yes, okay. I mean, as Donghong mentioned that China, Korea, Japan actually work together very closely for advancing science communication in Asian area. But we do that work for 10 years very actively until maybe 2013. But after that, after 10 years, we lost every collaborations. Why? Because three of us left the organizations. So in Asian context, the person is very, very important to continue your work. So I'm suggesting, why don't we rebuild another network from this point, right? Because this Asian network for the PCST, I mean, it's although it's a local, but it will connect to the global one. So I think we need to collaborate again from this part. That's my challenge, actually. Thank you.
Without the PCST network, it would not have been possible to produce that book, Communicating Science, which was endorsed by PCST. And for those of you who don't know it, it's available, you can download it free online. But that documents the story of how science communication emerged in 39 different countries around the world. And I can see some of the authors in the room here now, and it's had just such benefits in bringing the whole PCST community together. And for some countries, it's the first time they've sat down and they've documented the story of how it began and who the important people were and how the processes have evolved. And there'll be continuous benefits, I think, in having this baseline story that told, and I hope that some people will eventually build on it and do an update of the book as it stands today.
Bernard, you were at the first event with 30 people. You're now at this symposium with a couple of hundred. What's changed? Where do you think the challenges are that lie ahead?
Challenger, I don't
Our
know.
elder, founder, has the last words.
We'll see in the future what were the challenge we would have to face. We will see. But for myself, I would say that what it brought me is two things extremely simple. It opened my mind to the diversity of the world. I think that's an extraordinary richness to meet people, to see the way they understand the world, and to try to work with them. I think that's what absolutely extraordinary. And this is what has happened over the last 35 years, because I've been involved in that project for 35 years. And the other thing, so it's very simple, open your mind, expand your mind, be open to other people, the differences. And the second one is trust, because what I think is characterized the PCST network is the relation of trust that has been developed among all the members. And I think part of the success is that capacity to rely on someone, to trust someone. Because over the charter, over the formality, over what makes an organization, an international organization, what really matters at the bottom, at the core, is the trust you have and the trust in which you invest somebody. And I think that's what really is the characteristic so far, and I hope it will last for years and for years, the PCST network. So opening the mind to other realities and trusting and developing trust with the people you work with. And I think for me, that was really something that changed my life, so to speak.
I don't think I can add to that, so please join with me in thanking our fabulous panel this morning.